In 2005, a routine audit at a small bank in Macau uncovered something that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. Sitting in North Korean government accounts were $25 million in US currency. Some of it was real, some of it wasn't. And the ones that weren't real were so convincing, so technically precise, that they had fooled banks, casinos, and currency exchanges across 26 countries for years. The US Secret Service had a name for them: Supernotes. Not because they were impressive for a counterfeit, because they were, by measurable technical standards, superior to most genuine US currency in circulation. This is the story of how a government, isolated, sanctioned, and cut off from the global financial system, decided to solve its hard currency problem by printing money that wasn't theirs, and nearly got away with it for a quarter of a century. To understand why North Korea started printing fake dollars, you have to understand what North Korea actually is. It is not a country with a government that sometimes commits crimes. It is a criminal enterprise that happens to control a country. The Kim family has run what amounts to a family business for 3 generations, and like any business, it needs revenue. The problem is that North Korea produces almost nothing the world wants to buy. Its currency is worthless outside its borders, and decades of sanctions have severed it from the international banking system. So Kim Jong-il, the second generation who ran the country from 1994 until his death in 2011, created Bureau 39. Room 39, a department inside the Korean Workers' Party with one job: generate hard currency for the Kim family by any means necessary. Drugs, arms trafficking, insurance fraud, and counterfeiting. The superdollar was Bureau 39's most sophisticated product, but it was not the only one. At the same time North Korea was printing fake hundreds, it was manufacturing methamphetamine and heroin at government-run facilities and moving them through the same embassy courier networks. In 2003, Australian authorities intercepted a North Korean cargo ship, the Pongsu, carrying 50 kilograms of heroin to Australian shores. It had diplomatic cover. It always had diplomatic cover. US intelligence estimates have placed Bureau 39's total annual revenue across all criminal streams: counterfeiting, narcotics, arms, insurance fraud, cigarette smuggling, at somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion per year. For a country with a GDP of roughly $30 billion, that is not supplemental income. That is how the regime survives. The counterfeiting program likely began in the late 1980s. The target was the US $100 bill, the most widely circulated large-denomination currency in the world, and the de facto reserve currency of black markets everywhere from Lagos to Beirut to Moscow. If you were going to print fake money, the 100 was the one to print. What made the North Korean operation different from every other counterfeiting program in history was the technology. Most counterfeit currency is produced with commercial printing equipment, offset presses, inkjet printers, laser printers. The quality is detectable under magnification. Experienced cashiers can feel the difference. North Korea didn't use commercial printing equipment. Intaglio printing is the process used by the US Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The ink is pressed into grooves cut into a metal plate and transferred to paper under enormous pressure. The result is raised ink with a tactile texture you can feel with your fingernails. It's also extraordinarily expensive to replicate, which is exactly why governments use it, and why every other counterfeit in history has failed to match it. North Korea got the presses. The question investigators spent years trying to answer was how. The best available evidence points to the Soviet collapse. After 1991, Soviet-era industrial equipment, including specialized printing machinery, became available through black market channels across Eastern Europe and Central Asia. North Korea exploited that window. Front companies with no traceable connection to Pyongyang acquired the equipment through intermediaries, and the machinery arrived in North Korea piece by piece through third countries, with its origin obscured at every step. They also got the paper. US currency is printed on a distinctive blend of 75% cotton and 25% linen, a composition that gives bills their unique feel and durability. North Korea sourced the same blend. Then they sourced the correct ink formulations, replicated the security thread embedded in the paper, replicated the microprinting on the portrait border, and incorporated color-shifting ink. The result was a bill that passed every field test, pen tests, UV lights, tactile checks. Experienced bank tellers who handled currency every day could not tell the difference without sophisticated detection equipment. The distribution network was elegant. North Korean embassies around the world operated under diplomatic immunity. Their pouches could not be searched by customs. Embassy staff and government-sanctioned couriers moved supernotes into circulation through money changers, casinos, and black markets in Macau, Russia, the Middle East, and across Southeast Asia. In Europe, investigators later alleged links to the Irish Republican Army, which reportedly received supernotes in exchange for weapons and distributed them through criminal networks on the continent. In 2005, Irish authorities arrested Sean Garland, the leader of the Workers' Party of Ireland, on charges of distributing North Korean supernotes across Europe. According to the indictment, Garland had traveled to Pyongyang multiple times to collect the bills directly and coordinate their movement through IRA-linked networks in Ireland, Britain, and the continent. It was the most explicit documented case of North Korea using a foreign political organization as a distribution arm. By the mid-1990s, supernotes had been detected in 26 countries. The Secret Service knew the bills were North Korean in origin. The quality of the printing left almost no other explanation, but they couldn't prove it in a way that would hold up diplomatically, and they couldn't stop it. The bills were already in circulation. Somewhere between $45 and $50 million in confirmed supernotes had moved through the global financial system. The real number, accumulated over more than 2 decades of operation, was almost certainly several times higher. Then came Banco Delta Asia. In September 2005, the U.S. Treasury Department designated Banco Delta Asia, a small private bank in Macau with deep ties to North Korean government accounts, as a primary money laundering concern under Section 311 of the USA Patriot Act. The designation didn't freeze accounts directly. It did something more powerful. It told every bank in the world that processing transactions involving Banco Delta Asia would risk losing access to the U.S. financial system. Within days, banks across Asia stopped accepting North Korean transactions. $25 million in North Korean government funds at Banco Delta Asia were frozen. The number sounds small, and by the standards of most geopolitical disputes it is. But for a regime that operated entirely on hard currency flows and had no legal access to international correspondent banking, losing $25 million and the ability to move money through the global system was catastrophic. North Korea agreed to the 6-party nuclear talks almost immediately, not because of military pressure, not because of sanctions on goods or oil, because the US had found the one lever that actually worked, cutting off the money, and then the United States gave it back. Under pressure from South Korea, which feared that financial strangulation would derail the nuclear negotiations entirely, Washington agreed to unfreeze the $25 million in 2007. The funds were transferred to a North Korean account at a Russian bank. North Korea pocketed the money, withdrew from the nuclear talks anyway, and went back to business as usual. The one financial weapon that had demonstrably worked was voluntarily surrendered. Pyongyang took careful note. In 1996, the US had already redesigned the $100 bill, adding color-shifting ink in the lower right corner that shifts from gold to green when tilted. It was designed specifically to counter North Korean counterfeiting. North Korea eventually cracked it. Not immediately, it took years. But the supernotes eventually incorporated color-shifting ink as well. In 2013, the US launched the most significant redesign in the bill's modern history. The blue 3-dimensional security ribbon, a woven strip embedded in the paper itself, with shifting bells and hundreds that move when the bill is tilted, was a manufacturing technology North Korea never successfully replicated. No country has. The ribbon requires equipment so specialized that even well-resourced state programs cannot duplicate it. The superdollar program effectively ended. The presses still exist, the expertise still exists. But the bills they produce, designed for a pre-2013 $100, are no longer passable in most of the developed world. Banks and currency exchange machines have been updated. The window closed. North Korea did not immediately accept that. For several years after the 2013 redesign, supernotes already in circulation continued to move. Bills printed in the 1990s and 2000s, already embedded in global cash flows, remained viable in some markets, particularly in developing countries where detection technology lagged. But as the years passed and the bills aged, their utility declined. By the late 2010s, the superdollar had effectively retired itself. Not because North Korea chose to stop, because the currency it was forging had changed, and Pyongyang could not change with it. What remained was Bureau 39, now pivoting entirely to cyber. The Lazarus Group, North Korea's state-sponsored hacking unit, has stolen an estimated $3 billion in cryptocurrency since 2017. The method changed, the logic didn't. When you have no legal access to the global financial system, you find other ways in. The superdollar story is a window into something most people don't want to accept about North Korea, that it is not a failed state. It is a highly functional criminal state that has sustained a ruling family and a nuclear weapons program for decades on the proceeds of fraud, narcotics, counterfeiting, and cyber theft. The Kim regime does not need to trade with the world, it needs to steal from it. The superdollar program is over, the Lazarus Group took its place. But the question the program posed in the 1980s has never been answered. What is the international community actually willing to do to financially isolate a nuclear-armed criminal state? Banco Delta Asia gave us the clearest answer on record. The pressure worked, and the United States reversed it anyway. And every government in Pyongyang since has understood exactly what that means, that the world will always eventually find a diplomatic reason to back down, that the frozen account will eventually be unfrozen, and that Bureau 39 simply needs to outlast the resolve of whoever is applying the pressure. So far the answer has always been the same: leave it cracked.